Thank you for coming here in large numbers for this conference, Reinventing Renewable Energies. We did that for the 20th anniversary for the Plein Soleil magazine. I am the chief editor. 20 years is a long way to go with renewable energies, and in 20 years a lot has happened. I see many faces. I recognize many faces in the room. Some of them became friends. So this wonderful universe of renewable energies, I went through ups and downs. But since, like everything else right now in the world, and we'll discuss that with our speakers. We have a great collection of pioneers and experts on renewable energies. It's going to be a very unique roundtable, thinking about the energy transition of tomorrow. Some ideas are to come up of this conference. André Joffre, who will join us later on the stage to close the conference, says it often. Tomorrow, all the roofs will be blue. We hope that it's going to be the case, and we're going to try to answer all the questions. How do we build a real world without fossil fuels? What are the measures, legal measures that need to be put in place right now? Then we'll focus on the new association called Future. Everybody can hear me fine? Yes. Please wear your headsets, otherwise you won't hear me. So the association Future with Joël MERCY, who's the general director of the association. He will present the association to you. We have a surprise. We have two videos, one from the former minister, the Minister of the Environment, and the other one from Bertrand Piccard that everybody knows with his Plein Soleil impulse, who's going to talk to us about the future. And he sent us a great video. So I'd like to present my panel. Next to me this afternoon, Cédric Philibert, you're a researcher. So you do research on energy and climate. You wrote a book, The Energies of Hope. There'll be a signing of the book actually right after the conference, and you'll be invited to meet Cédric to see his book. Jean-yves Grandidier, you're the president of VALOREM. You are a developer, and you are the local from us, well, kind of. And we'll talk about renewable energy and your job of a developer that is in full change. Christian Dupraz, you are in Montpellier. You are at INRAE, the Agronomic Research Institute. Arnaud Gossement, you're an associate with the firm Gossement & Associés. You're specialized in law and the environment. So we'll see exactly what is the regulatory framework around renewable energies. And Alexandra Battle, you're the General Secretary of Tecsol, and we'll look into the collective use and the needs for electricity in France today. So we're going to start with you, Cédric Philibert. We're going to talk about the renewable energies. Your book is called The Energies of Hope. We're in a very tense and uncertain world, a polarized world, some like to say as well, world in war as well. The energies of hope, what does it mean globally? What can you tell us globally about renewable energies in the world right now? Thank you, Jean-Louis. I'm speaking about solar and wind energy. Those are the two energies that have the biggest potential globally, and which quick growth explained that today in the production of energy, while we remain at 20% of the overall energy production, we went up to 2022 to 30%. Now we're at 40% soon in about 3-4 years, and we'll be at 50% in 2032, 2033. So we have a very quick growth of solar and wind, particularly solar energy, because solar is everywhere. It's hard to stop. It's in full motion. We invented the solar cell In 1954, it took us 70 years, 2023, to have the first terawatts of solar energy installed. It's 1 million gigawatt, 1 billion kilowatts. It took 70 years, 69 years precisely, to get there. And 2 years later, we put on the second one. So in 2004, it took us the whole year to put 1 gigawatt in the world. In 2010, we did it every month. In 2015, we did it every week. And since 2023, it's every day. And this year, we're at 1.7 gigawatts, which is 1,700 megawatt installed in the world every day. And that goes very fast, and that wind energy started earlier, but is going a little less fast, and that's what drives up the renewable energies, electric renewables. Once they are decarbonated, they go very fast. In China, for example, in 2030, half of the Chinese electricity will be renewable. 2030. We're close to that mark. Once we have decarbonated electricity, we can decarbonate the rest of society. Electricity is 20% of final energy, so there's 80% that is fuels, there's biomass, there's solar heat, but they're fossil-based, most of them. So we're going to have to use a lot of this decarbonated energy to kick out the fossil energy out of the buildings and the industry and transport. And this is the second step, but we need to start on it now to really fully decarbonate our economies in France and in the world. That's what we need to do. If you look at China today, the CO2 emissions are been stable for the last 18 months. We're at the peak in China. We already went over this peak in Europe and in the States. And there's some countries, of course, that keep having a very strong growth that is still based on coal, but this is changing as well. Indonesia, Vietnam, India, it's changing as well. So I feel that these energies and the electrification of society will allow us finally to turn around the curve of the CO2 emissions. Let's get back to France. Don't we have too many energies in France at the moment? That's what we hear, too much electricity and maybe too many renewables. What can you tell us about us, Cédric Philibert? It's true we have nuclear power as well. We have decarbonated earlier than the others. It's a fact. We did do it on purpose, and today it's kind of very busy. It makes the landscape very busy. There was a conference party giving their forecasts for 2035. And the general consensus, it's better to have a bit of an excess of decarbonated energy than to be in the red, to be, in scarcity, because when we encounter that, it cost us a lot of money. It was 60 billion of fossil energy, but it's 120. So it's better to produce a little too much than than not enough. It's hard, of course, to coincide exactly and precisely the means of production with the demand. What is not going so well, it's electrification. It's not going as fast enough. Before COVID, we told people to save energy. It worked too well. It worked so well that they remained very frugal and very prudent. But now we need to electrify. We need to move on to electric car, to move to electric pump, heat pump, to have an electric plant. And there are a lot of things that we can do. There's some new processes coming to the market, but it doesn't go fast enough, is what you're saying? No. There's a lot of RT has a lot of demand for linking for gigawatts, but the plants are not there yet. The investors are still hesitating. There's a potential of acceleration that is very strong. RT has produced two scenarios yesterday, one of quick carbonation and one of slow decarbonation. In the quick decarbonation scenario, we're going to need really to accelerate on the renewables and not slow down on them. So there may be a bit of hesitation at the parliament or in some political places or economic places, but on the situation, But let's not forget that our nuclear park is about 40 years old. So I know we said we're going to prolong the life of the reactors by 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe more, but that we don't know if it's possible yet. They were designed at the beginning to be economically profitable over 40 years. We don't know how much it costs to extend their life cycle. So the maintenance work by EDF is going to go up next year. We're going to go from 15 heavy operations to 20, so it's going to be very tricky. So we're not going to keep all that forever, and we don't know how to build new reactors quickly and at an affordable prices. We saw that with the EPR. We went over the 20 billion. So we need to move on to renewables. Solar energy is unstoppable. Everybody wants it. And with the sodium battery that is coming to the market, nobody will care about the purchasing price, the buyout price. But what we need more of is wind energy, because in moderate climates like France, we need more kilowatt per hour from the wind than from the solar energy. And we can place a lot of solar energy, but it's not what's going to give us energy in the winter. That's why we need to bank on the wind energy. And France is weak right now on wind farms, and particularly wind energy on land. So let's accelerate the renewable energies. That's the motto of your speech. Yes, it is. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. Jean-yves Grandidier, president of VALOREM. You are a developer, well-known developer. Developers, a few years ago, they were promoters. You'd sign a contract, you'd sign on the land and lease, and you'd sign contracts for 20 years with EDF. Now the game has changed, and you become real energy salespeople. You are energeticians, if I can use this word. Can you explain us this shift, and how do you experience it every day as a developer? Yes. Yes, up to now, a few years ago, when we developed a project, we'd sign on a lease, obtain a permit, a linking permit as well. And we had an obligation to buy back the electricity, so we didn't have to make any sales efforts on the sales side. Now it's changed. We need to go out and sell the electricity on the market. We need to sell it at the best time. VALOREM, do you know what it means, VALOREM? I created the company in '94. It means valorization based on renewable energies and being on top of the energy. So we've been aware for a while that we need to be capable to realign consumption and production. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to sell that, and we're trying to sell the energy. But things are complicated at the moment, and it's complicated because maybe the public authorities are not fully aware of what should be done from a regulation point of view. So we had a proper framework, regulatory framework, to valorize and create value for us, but also for the people, to be able to decarbonate through electrification. There's a number of things to do there. So I wanted to react to something that came out recently. It was a paper written by Madame Pannier-Runacher, former Ministry of the Energy Transition. Let's stop being just about ideology and focus on the concrete details. In order to still remain an industrial power, we need to use a number of levers. We need to electrify the usages, decarbonation. That's what Cédric was saying a minute ago. There are two areas which we can decarbonate. The first one is transport, and the other one is heat, particularly industrial heating. But today we try to put in place some business models to do some PPAs and sell electricity to create heat. Low temperature heat can be stored. So we can produce the heat when electricity is not too expensive, when we have excesses or we have negative prices. But today it's complicated because the tax of the production of electricity in France with the CO2 emissions is 11 times more important than the one of fossil fuels and gas in particular. So if you look at this finance law, the new finance law, they're going to try to increase the excise for gas and they're going to drop the one for electricity, but we're still at 33, maybe we'll move down to 30. So it doesn't help us. And if we want to be able to have some business models that work, we need to be able to have a regulation and a tax system that is that helps us, which is not the case. The second thing is she talks about electrifying the usages. We've installed the biggest wind farm of France. It's 162 meters diameter, 5.5 megawatts around La Rochelle area. And I did a quick calculation by comparing a machine like this of 162 to a machine that's 150 meters, so with 180 at the end of the blades. The difference is big for the sites. So we need to really be able to go above the 200 meters threshold. We have this. We're told that it's going to be too high, but we need to go above that. I have some wind farms at 150 and some at 100. And the day of the inauguration, tell me the difference. I say, oh, we don't really see. Yes, there's one that produces 2.5 times more than the other one. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the visual impact of the wind farms is going to be, people judge it by the number and not the size. But if we have enough of those, we're going to reach our goals. So where people are resisting, is it for visual reasons? Yeah, they feel like a machine of 200-meter high is like a skyscraper, is like a tall building. It's not what it is. And then there's a question of developing critical size projects. I think they were thinking more in terms of solar. The law to do some projects, but not above 5 megawatts. When I go for a tender project for 5 with 15 megawatts, it costs me 10 euros per megawatt per hour. So if we want to reduce the bill, they're right. We should increase the size of the solar projects to amortize the cost. We also need to standardize the network. We need to reduce the specific power of the wind farms. I'm giving you an example. Like this machine, it's a V210. So I compared the 2 megawatt to the 3 megawatts in the park, and if comparing these two wind farms together, I have the same power, nominal power at the end, the same capacity at the end. I do 1,000 hours more with solar, with a bit of nuclear as well. The production, the decarbonated production, goes way above the non-flexible production. That creates value because it's going to reduce the price of electricity, and at the times where we need to have production means such as batteries or pickers that are very expensive to commission, we will be able to produce 50% more at these times when there's low wind and when electricity is expensive. So at these periods of time, we will be able to create value and to help the consumers to save money. Last point, to make the producers responsible on the variability of the production. I'm not talking about intermittent production, but variable production. I made a quick calculation on a hybrid product, 10 hours of storage. If we limit the hosting capacity to half of the power created, 5 megawatts, if we compare it to a project without hybridation, we increase the price of carbon capture to 60 euros per megawatt per hour. So it's that many euros of value captured for you. And we also help reduce the bill by 20% for the locals, for the users. So since it was the case in 2022, 2023, instead of having compensation checks for the excess that was produced, this is us who will write checks. So you really gave us a number of leads to reinvent the energies, which is a theme of the conference. Storage, increasing the size of the wind turbines, the windmills. There's more solutions to find more competitivity. Christian Dupraz, thank you very much. Let's applaud Jean-yves Grandidier, So you are the person who invented the word agrivoltaism, which is a conflict of usage between agriculture and electricity production. How did you have this vision of agrivoltaism, Christian Dupraz? I didn't only invent the word. We did the first experience in the world in Montpellier, here at the Domaine de la Valette, that is still operating. We can go visit if you want, and we're going to improve it to turn it into an historical site, because at the time, agrivoltaism already existed, but we didn't know. In Japan, the Japanese had put in place some plots with PV panels and culture, and they didn't produce anything, they didn't publish anything until 2020. So we discovered this later on. So in 2008, we realized that production of energy in agriculture was very important. It had already existed for centuries. Agriculture has provided enough to feed the horses that would constitute the major source of energy for transport and industrial activities in Europe. So there's nothing new in the concept of having linking energy and culture, but we started working on transforming biomass in fuel. And then a quick calculation made by several scientists, agronomists, people specialized in energy. Everybody realized that the biomass sector is much less efficient than the photovoltaic sector. So with 1 hectare of farmland, you can have a thermic engine car drive, and with the same amount of space, with PV panels, you have 200 times more energy efficiency for the same car. So of course we can decarbonate a number of non-electrifiable activities, but we do much better with the direct electricity from photovoltaic than if we go through the agricultural crops. Burning corn or beetroot doesn't seem very logical. These are molecules that do better than just being burned. And that's when the ideas start from. I was working in agroforestry. We're really mixing up trees and cultures to better use the sun and the water and the resource and nitrogen. And then we thought maybe we should combine PV panels and culture, and we put it all in place in Montpellier, and that's how it all started. Tell us about the agronomic results, because we produce energy, okay, great, but what is the yield? It's true and it's not true. If you have cultures with a lot of biomass that do a lot of dry matter per year, corn or beetroots, if you produce shade, you're going to reduce the yield because it is proportional to the light that the plant will catch. So we'll have to find compromises there. But there are many cultures that suffer from too high temperatures, too much light, and with climate change, particularly more. And those structures are really the targets of agrivoltaism. So we work on wine, fruit, some pastures, etc., different types of pastures. And protection by PV panel can be extremely helpful to the yield. We shouldn't sell stuff that is out of this world. The French law requires 90% of the yield of reference. I think it's an impossible mission for the farmers. The law is too optimistic. It should be more reasonable, like in Germany, where we require 66% of the yield, and the German or the Japanese require 80% of the yield. I think we'll have to adapt this law and to be more realistic and not ask the farmers to do what they cannot do, because in the system, the energy specialists take the farmers as hostages, because if the farmer cannot produce what the law requires, the project is jeopardized. So the energy experts hope that it's not going to be the case, there won't be any sanctions, but it's not healthy. We need a system where all the partners feel comfortable, feel respected, and feel that nobody expects them to do miracles. On breeding, cattle breeding as well, for animal welfare, well-being, animals like shade. They like to be protected from the rain when it's raining. So this is an important aspect of it. I'd like to say that we shouldn't say that agrivoltaism is going to save agriculture, because we're not going to cover the whole country of France with PV panels. We're going to do a little bit of it. But even if we do just a bit, it represents just 1% of the land, the farming land in France, and agrivoltaism sounds very reasonable, particularly if it's well integrated. If it becomes acceptable and accepted, we could easily have this energy that is everywhere. It is really everywhere. There's light everywhere. There's sun everywhere. Half of the installations, the PV installations in Germany are northern in Lille, so we can do it everywhere in the French on the French territory. Did you talk about the acceptability of voltaism? Because if the economic results are there, but yeah, they're there, but they have to be taken carefully. I don't fully agree with what Jean-yves Grandidier said. We need to be very careful about the acceptability of this set work, and we should not go for too big projects. There's another issue here today is we cannot develop micro projects. When I call it micro projects, 1 to 2 hectares, projects that could be in each farm, because these projects have to comply to the same constraints than the big projects. So they makes them non-competitive. But I talked a lot with the vice president of the Association of the Mayors of France, and he has an idea that I found brilliant. Each French farmer should have the right to have a bit of 10% of his land that would be eligible for an agrivoltaic activity. And if he can negotiate it, if he doesn't want to do it on his own land, he should sell it to his neighbor who would have a bigger project. So all the farmers would be interested in that, and it would stop with all the jealousy, and it's something that needs to be dug on.
Would you like to react to what Christian said? Is it possible to have a 5 megawatt agrivoltaic project? Well, it can be done, and it is done. It's a problem of cost, in fact. You gave us the example of vines. You need quite high structures, for example, with a lot of material, and that makes things more expensive. It increases the megawatt hour by 15 to 20 euros. On 1 hectare with agrivoltaics, you'll produce about 1,000 megawatts, and we're talking about 15,000 euros per hectare. So there may be an issue there. The consumer of electricity will end up paying an extra cost. And I don't think that will really be acceptable in the long run. However, I agree entirely with the figures. Agrivoltaism will represent perhaps just 1%, and that won't solve the problem of the farmers today.
L'idée, ce serait d'en faire profiter un maximum, mais ça va.
The idea is that the most farmers possible benefit from it, but it'll be complicated. The problem of farmers is very complicated, even with electricity production, because some will benefit,
Malheureusement, on est tellement efficace
unfortunately not all.
C'est un peu bizarre de dire ça.
It seems odd to say this, but we really need big surface areas. 0.7% of the farmland, that would be 150, 160 terawatts an hour. That's not exactly the same as a nuclear power plant, but that will enable us to electrify transport, for example, just to give you an example. This will also make it possible to decarbonize farming. One of the big sources of CO2 in farming is methanization, it's the heating of the buildings, and also nitrogen-based fertilizers. If you calculate the carbon footprint, the fertilizers represent an awful lot. We can make nitrogen-based fertilizers with green electricity, however. You can produce this on a farm using green electricity. Currently, it's not profitable. Oil is not expensive at all, but once we've changed people's way of thinking and we've changed the taxing of fossil fuels and renewable energies, we could imagine that in the future, agriculture will be totally decarbonized. I know a farmer who every morning changes the batteries of his tractor in his field because he uses agrivoltaicism. Thank you. In terms of taxes, maybe taxes will change, and people who use hydrogen and natural gas, they may get a waiver, a tax break. Just a few words. It's true that hydrogen is very useful, potentially. We've identified this when we started to work on green hydrogen. Ammoniac for fertilizer, for example, and explosives, but mainly for fertilizer to decarbonize farming. So I agree entirely with this idea. There's another point. In France, we need a certain number of big facilities on the ground because that's what we need in order to achieve reindustrialization. We need abundant, decarbonized, cheap electricity, and you can only achieve that with solar energy and wind energy. Thank you. I think that currently agrivoltaicism is a major component. In France, people are hesitating. There's a sort of a moratorium. A lot of associations combat local projects, but let's not forget that elsewhere, this is growing hugely. Germany's moving much faster than we are. In Italy, they have a better scheme than we do. There are specific calls for tenders in agrivoltaicism, and I don't see why we don't have an agrivoltaic category when there are calls for tenders. People don't know what it's all about. They get things mixed up. In the last call for tenders, it's agrivoltaic projects where the prices were the lowest. And we were limited to 250 megawatts. We were the least expensive. They selected projects where the price was much higher because the regulations meant that these projects were given priority because it was on degraded land. So to conclude, all this photovoltaic decentralized energy is something that will become a given even in the tropical areas and in Asia. The biggest agrivoltaic plant currently is in China, 1 gigawatt at peak power, and a span of 1,000 hectares. Thank you very much. I think we can give them a round of applause. Next speaker, the usage and how they're going to evolve. Well, first of all, I'd like to react to what has been said so far. We're living at a time which is extremely interesting. As Jean-yves recalled,
André qui nous rejoindra tout à l'heure, à vous, Jean-yves. Le monde du solaire, c'était simple.
The world used to be simple. You produce, sold it to EDF, and that's all. Now, we've moved on to a different era, and clearly, solar power is a huge source. There are so many different models, electrons too. I wanted to share this impression. We're talking about the tip of the iceberg. That's what we see currently. We have the growth in negative price hours. People say there may be too much electricity. These is an interesting indicator. But they only represent the tip of the iceberg. Of course, there are negative price hours, over 500 hours in 2025, for example. And you have virtually nil hours too. But that would be a short-term view of things. When it comes to negative price hours, there are about 15% of these negative hours which take place at night and very early in the morning. So you really have to look at things in detail. And then some people say there'll be too much electricity. Here again, you have to be very cautious. I think we underestimate artificial intelligence, which will play an ever bigger part in life. Look at the US, in Washington and in California. They're having more and more difficulty connecting the data centers. There are 44 gigawatts, which will be missing in terms of electricity in order to link up the data centers. So we have a part to play in France if we want to welcome this kind of facility, data centers, given the fact we have abundant electricity. So you're saying that in the US there's a lack of electricity for data centers with 44 gigawatts? In other words, people will set up data centers in France? Yes, that's one possibility. The boss of NVIDIA has said that China will win the AI battle because it can produce a lot of cheap renewable energy. And the boss of Microsoft said about the same thing. So it's a trend which isn't yet tangible, but in the long run it will justify having so much capacity. Of course, we have all this production, but that's not really the issue. We need to talk about the lack of flexibility more. Once again, this overproduction is only temporary. Also, individual self-consumption, collective self-consumption, that also is a good way of using electricity. These are all very interesting levers. We can see this in Tecsol in the studies we conduct. Individual self-consumption has become the basis of a lot of projects. First question, can you do individual self-consumption? If the answer is yes, people do it, because that is where you have the greatest value. And then that works in concentric circles. If I have a surplus, then I will inject it in the local loop with local consumers. And then you can do a PPA. This is something that works very well. For example, recharging electric vehicles. If there's an accident, you can sell it to industries nearby, and if there's still a surplus, that can be aggregated and included in the various sites so that a maximum amount of consumption is covered. You can always carry out this kind of project. Okay, thank you. Did you want to add anything before concluding? Okay. We'll give the floor to Arnaud. A round of applause for Alexandra. Arnaud Guzman. Hello. Thank you for being present here this afternoon. We have spoken about the legal framework, for example, in terms of agrivoltaism. Currently, there are acronyms like PPA, PMO, in collective self-consumption. The development of renewable energy also has to have a legal framework. Well, thank you to Tecsol, and thank you, André, for this invitation, and thank you to you all for coming here. Clearly, renewable energy has a rosy future. Now, if I may, I'd like to react to what was just said. We haven't talked about the elephant in the room, the biggest one, fossil fuels. That's why I want to react. You're quite correct to talk about this. Currently, each year, according to the IMF, states spend $7,000 billion to support the consumption of fossil energy, that is coal, gas, and oil. Be it in 1900, in the 70s, or in 2006, there have been many reactions to the risks that linked to fossil fuels. Dangers for man, economic danger, and now we have the climate danger, the climate risk. We're talking about the consequences of burning fossil fuels, but people haven't agreed to limit production. The COP in Berlin, well, the states didn't want to include a goal to reduce the production of fossil fuel. Then you have the World Treaty on Plastics. That was also a failure, for example. If you say, let's include in a text a reduction in fossil fuels, you'll meet with a no. So there's no point talking about the electrification of uses in law if there's no room for it. 80% of primary energy is fossil fuels, 60% in France. And according to certain organizations, this dependency is growing. So we have to talk about fossil fuel, reduce fossil fuel use. In 2007, there was a consensus on the part of MEDEF and all the NGOs. They said this is the absolute priority. At the press conference, that's what was said. We have to reduce our dependence on fossil fuel in order to decarbonize quickly. And then the legal framework will flow from that. But now we're just changing the rules. There's a forthcoming reform on solar panels and parking areas. There's a bill being studied currently. But we need to agree on why we're doing this. Why are we doing it? Well, it's to reduce the place of fossil fuels, which kill people, which are costly. They're very costly in France. 46 billion euros a year in public money supports consumption. 2 years ago, there was a drop in the taxation of gas for cars. We have a carbon tax. And then there was this debate and all these demonstrations by the Yellow Vest. But we have to look at the cost as well. People say you have to lower the cost. We're talking about the cost of renewable energy. Rather than producing another report on this point, I would like to have a report on the exact cost of fossil fuel. And then you'll see that public opinion would be struck to see what the cost is in terms of health, for example. And in agriculture, the cost of fossil fuel is massively used in fertilizer, in inputs, in pesticides as well. It's bad for health, it's bad for our soil, bad for the farmers, and it's a cost for people at large. So let's talk about taxation of fossil fuels. And let's just not talk just about the energy check. I believe that the public opinion will then realize how worthwhile it is to have renewable energies. It's not just a state that needs to say, I want to simplify the legal framework. In Italy, people are more aware of the fact that fossil fuels are a real problem in terms of sovereignty. We depend on foreign production. But that suits us quite well because you don't see it. The problem with wind energy is that you can see the windmills. The problem, so to speak, is not a problem for me. But we don't have oil rigs, oil wells. I think that everyone should understand that if you look at renewable energy plants, you should be proud to participate, either in companies or through crowdfunding or in upcoming municipal elections. Mayors should be asked what they intend to do. Mayors play a big role when it comes to renewable energies, and not only in the acceleration zones. It's a real opportunity to go and say to the future mayor, what are you doing to ensure our sovereignty and to fight climate change, protect our health? The answer is renewable energy. Then obviously this will lead to the development of renewable energy in France. And then afterwards, people can then say, well, you need to simplify the legal framework. Currently, today, people are going about things the wrong way around. Our objectives are totally obsolete. If you look at our energy code, the goal is to reduce the greenhouse gases, but it's obsolete. In Europe, it's 55, and in France, we talk about 40%. You're talking about PPE, but the actual objective in the text is obsolete. The goal, as RTE said yesterday, is to do without oil. It costs far too much. And there should be regulatory obligations to impose renewable energy. Yes, indeed. But I'm not sure this should be made an obligation. Look what's happening. We're changing the legal framework for solar panels and parking areas and buildings. The legislation keeps changing. We have to focus on the harmful alternatives like fossil fuels. We have to reduce fossil fuels in farming. That would impose an electrification of use at the same time. Instead of focusing on this or that problem, you have to use a bigger lens and realize that our main problem, the problem of the century, the problem of humanity, is oil. And then, indeed, we can agree on the legal framework. Let's be intelligent. Agrivoltaism, for example, is a missed opportunity. We wanted to create a suitable legal framework. It was a very good idea, and then look what happened. You have about 30 different texts on agrivoltaism now. There are regular changes, moreover, and that's not good. Farmers say, well, what's an opportunity today may not be in the future. So you have to have a stable framework. So you need a degree of political consensus. And that will take place not because you say you have to do this or that. You can't force a horse to drink. Some politicians think, well, oil isn't all that expensive. That's what's dramatic. They have to be brought to understand that we need to change our civilization. Of course, I'm talking to people who are convinced of the fact, so I'm sorry to have to be so trite. I think we should talk about the real health, environmental, human cost of oil, fossil fuel, and then we'll see how little renewable energy actually costs. Thank you very much indeed. I think we can give Arnaud a round of applause. Before we go on to the videos, I'd like to do a short Q&A. Do you have any questions to our speakers? Who wants to ask a first question? Introduce yourself, please. Thank you. David Ojex. I'm a developer, president of Occident in Montpellier. Don't you think when you talk about forcing a horse to drink who isn't thirsty, Don't you think we're talking about a very French exception currently? People are comparing nuclear energy and renewable energy. But since the year 2000, we need to ramp up renewable energy. Are they going to replace the nuclear energy, our nuclear tool, which was so fabulous in the 60s and 70s? I think we need to rise above this debate comparing nuclear and renewable energy. This is just a very French hexagonal problem, and that's holding us back when it comes to electrifying our usages. Are there any other questions? Arnaud? Of course, I agree with you. We have to compare electricity and oil. That's what's important. Nuclear power is maybe 4% of electricity production. Our problem is oil. People talk about oil. Look at Donald Trump, who's encouraging it. Other people berate oil. A fortnight ago, I met someone from NRL, which is the American unit, and Trump forced them to change their name. It shouldn't be renewables. He gave me some reassuring news. He said in the U.S., renewable energy is developing fast. And even if Trump stomps his foot, renewable energy is developing very well in the U.S., so it's not all lost by any means. Even the most reactionary ideology can't hide the physical reality that we need renewable energy. The European state, which has the most solar energy, you know what it is? Where the share of renewable energy, solar energy, is highest in Europe today? It's Hungary. Mr. Orban. And the American state, which has the most wind farms and solar energy, I bet it's Texas. Maybe this is too idealistic or theoretical. In fact, we have lots of assets in our European electricity system. We have renewable energy, nuclear energy, and this is not being used in an optimal fashion when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. Nuclear energy is turned down on the weekend, renewables when the prices get negative. These are many terawatts per hour, and these are terawatt hours that are then produced by oil. So maybe we should have a big battery development plan. Then we could talk about nuclear energy and renewables. If we have a big plan to develop batteries, that would be wonderful because we're going to need a lot. Thus, we'll have the requisite storage capacity, and hence we won't have to use the nuclear power plants on a Saturday evening when there's a lot of electricity being used, and they can be stopped for, say, 36 hours. That won't be a problem. There won't be 36 hours of negative prices, for example. So I think we should move in this direction with nuclear electricity and people who defend nuclear electricity. In fact, that's what a lot of people say. Why do we talk about EPR now, whereas we could optimize the production of existing nuclear power plants? And I think this will entail the use of battery. We have to hugely develop batteries. We have an asset in France, which other countries don't have. We're at the center of the European grid. We're the country with the most interconnections with its neighbors. So all this renewable energy from Spain or from Germany, well, we'll be able to use it like Switzerland did with nuclear energy. They stored in their system all this nuclear energy, and it was used at peak times, and that could create a lot of value, could create a lot of activity, making the most of our assets today. We're in a country where we don't use our assets because we're lacking vision. We have tools, but we don't use them. We need a big plan which will develop batteries, and that will enable us to really make the most of all the assets we have. But people clearly have no vision. That's what I would like to see. Well, thank you very much, Alexandra. I agree entirely. Storage is an essential piece of the puzzle in order to create this energy community which Brussels wanted. People didn't understand it at the time. It may appear quite artificial, but now we can indeed, and we must have projects which mix self-consumption, storage, agrivoltaism. That's how we will be able to create really good, meaningful models for everyone involved. As to this antagonism between renewable energies and nuclear power, I agree entirely also with everything that was said. We need nuclear power, we need renewable energy. 60 billion is spent on gas and oil. We're not talking about the figures for 2022, but the figures are very high. Well, thank you very much to all five of you. We've done a Q&A, but I can't take any more. We're running too late, so we'll move on right away. Just a very, very quick question. I'm president of the SAS in Montpellier Collectif Citoyen. What about financing? We need to win over public opinion. We need to convince people that renewable energy is necessary. What do you think about the citizen financing tool? You talk about citizen-based energy communities. Well, why couldn't we use that? We should encourage more citizens to invest and to take control of energy as part owners of the facilities, photovoltaic facilities and others. Thank you. If I may, that's fundamental. We must encourage this indeed, and we shouldn't oppose it. Some people say, oh, you need crowdfunding, for example, not necessarily companies. You shouldn't oppose the two. You're quite right in what you said. Other people oppose the two. I think the two forms of financing are complementary. The projects I defend are sometimes citizen-based projects, but you also have professionals who provide the technology and the financing experience, which citizens who launch into the project don't necessarily have. So both are indispensable and complementary.
Et dans les modèles, du coup, est-ce que vous pensez que des petites
Do you think that small individual companies are preferable as well when it comes to resilience compared with the very big companies? Is there a space for these very small companies? Well, thank you very much. There's room for everyone. I met some amazing people with citizen-based project with 300, 500, 800 people who put up 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 euros and who are trying to put together a project. These are admirable people. It's very difficult. In fact, they come up against, say, 4 people who don't want a wind farm a few kilometers from their castle. And they've been fighting for years, and they're not getting any results. I'm happy to encourage everyone. But sometimes it's very, very difficult, and it's not bad to have companies with the bigger means and who can hire lawyers to defend themselves and so on. It's a dogged fight at present to develop projects in this country where there's too much regulation. Thank you very much to all 5 of you. Thank you.
Merci à vous aussi. Alors, on parle de défenseurs.
We've talked about defending renewable energy. You are in charge of the Association Future that's just been created. You have an online petition. Can you tell us what this initiative is all about? How can one defend renewable energy? It's very difficult to take the floor after these known experts, but I'll try and do my best. As president, a lot of people know me as president of a big photovoltaic producer group. What is a citizen president doing in an association like Future? Well, today, just look at the figures. Currently, according to the last Ipsos poll, 84% of people are in favor of renewable energy, 84%. That's 57 million people in France. That's a lot of people. And there's something which is important for us as citizens. We have 1/3 of French citizens who cannot pay their electricity bill. We talked about this earlier on. 33%, that's 23 million people. So indeed, we need to have cheap electricity, and that's the aim of Future. It's not an association of people who defend producers or what have you. We have grouped everybody together in the same pot. It's hard to work with professionals. They have their ideas. The private individual may have different ones, but we will succeed. We've pulled everyone together. We're supported by a big syndicates in France, former ministers, former MPs, and local governments are keenly interested in the concept as well. The idea of defending renewable energies from the inside, that's the work we do on a daily basis. As Arnaud said, let's make the most of the municipal elections that are coming up. Talk about this to the mayor. Okay.
Tout d'abord, vous dire tous mes regrets de n'être pas parmi vous cet après-midi pour cette belle manifestation d'EnerGaïa, aux côtés de mon ami André Joffre pour parler de notre nouvelle association Future. Qu'est-ce que c'est que Future? Future est une association originale, c'est la Fédération des utilisateurs des énergies renouvelables. Pourquoi une association d'utilisateurs? Qu'ils soient particuliers, dans l'autoconsommation collective ou dans l'achat d'électricité renouvelable, collectivités locales ou entreprises. Tout simplement parce qu'ils ont les mêmes intérêts. Pourquoi? Bien sûr, celui de s'inscrire dans la transition, dans la décarbonation, dans l'électrification des usages, mais surtout d'y avoir un intérêt économique. Pourquoi un intérêt économique? Parce que le développement des énergies renouvelables massifs, que l'on peut espérer, tel qu'il se passe ailleurs dans l'Europe, sauf en France, permet de faire baisser le prix de l'électricité. Pourquoi? Parce que l'électricité est plus abondante et donc le prix baisse. Mais aussi, et surtout, parce qu'il donne à chacun une autonomie et une vision sur le moyen et le long terme du prix auquel il va acheter son électricité. C'est vrai pour des particuliers qui vont se regrouper pour faire de l'autoconsommation collective, c'est vrai pour des collectivités locales qui ont de plus en plus recours à des sociétés d'économie locale pour développer le renouvelable, quel qu'il soit. Et c'est vrai, bien entendu, pour les entreprises, car nous savons tous qu'il ne peut pas y avoir de réindustrialisation de la France s'il n'y a pas une énergie très abordable. Or, les transformations que nous avons vécues avec une baisse massive du prix du solaire, avec aujourd'hui une baisse massive du prix du stockage de l'électricité dans des batteries, avec la possibilité de moduler les usages que nous apprenons tous à faire de manière à utiliser l'électricité quand elle est abondante dans la journée, et beaucoup moins le soir où elle est moins abondante. Tout ceci conduit à pouvoir garantir sur la durée un prix de l'électricité très abordable. Et c'est là tout l'intérêt de l'énergie renouvelable. Cette fédération Future, elle a donc pour vocation d'accueillir tous ceux qui sont convaincus de l'intérêt pour eux et pour tous les autres du développement de l'énergie renouvelable, de convaincre et de faire en sorte que cette énergie qui est
this
abondante, celle
energy,
du soleil
which is
et celle
abundant,
de
we're
l'eau
talking
aussi,
about the
et celle
sun
du
and
vent,
water and
puisse
wind.
devenir
We hope
la
this
dominante
energy
en
will
Europe
then
et en
predominate
France.
in Europe and in France. There, everyone has recognized Corinne Lepage, Minister of the Environment. She's a wonderful godmother. We're also supported by André, Joffre, who is our father, and he has motivated many people to support renewable energy, not only in your country, particularly today. He invented the term of consumer. We have to be consumer actors, that is, produce and consume green renewable energy.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Vous vous attendez sûrement à ce que je vous dise que les énergies renouvelables sont des énergies propres, et ce n'est pas ça que je vais vous dire parce que vous le savez déjà. Moi, ce que j'aimerais dire, c'est que les énergies renouvelables sont capables de contenter et de satisfaire tous les partis. Évidemment, les partis écologiques, puisque ça protège l'environnement, mais aussi la gauche en général, parce que ça permet d'avoir des énergies beaucoup moins chères, de l'électricité beaucoup moins chère, et pour la solidarité avec ceux qui n'ont pas de quoi payer leur facture énergétique, eh bien c'est fondamentalement important. Ça augmente le pouvoir d'achat des gens les plus démunis, parce que leurs factures baissent. Ça va contenter le centre droit, parce que ce sont des emplois qui se créent. C'est une industrie qui se développe. Et je vais vous dire que ça peut même contenter ceux qui sont encore plus à droite, parce que ça va augmenter la souveraineté et l'indépendance énergétique de la France. Quand vous achetez pour des dizaines de milliards d'euros de pétrole et de gaz de l'étranger, il vous reste quoi à la fin de l'année? Il vous reste une dépendance à ces pays et il ne vous reste plus rien parce que vous l'avez brûlé. Quand vous mettez des milliards en investissement dans les énergies renouvelables, vous êtes beaucoup plus indépendant et à la fin de l'année, il vous reste quoi? Un outil de production qui continue à produire de l'électricité propre et bon marché, localement fabriquée pour les gens qui vivent en France. Donc vous voyez que on peut réunir, on peut fédérer autour des énergies renouvelables. Et c'est pour ça que j'ai accepté d'être président d'honneur de la Fédération Future, qui vise à permettre à chacun, que ce soit des individus, des collectivités locales, des entreprises, des associations, de produire et de consommer l'énergie renouvelable qu'ils auront fabriquée eux-mêmes et qu'ils pourront peut-être même s'échanger entre eux. C'est une magnifique initiative citoyenne que je soutiens de tout mon cœur et de toutes mes forces parce qu'elle répond à tous les besoins et à tous les enjeux actuels.
Thank you. A beautiful message, who we can give another round of applause. Come up to the rostrum to close. We've been working together for 30 years, and we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Plein Soleil. This is an adventure I have lived with you. It's been quite extraordinary. We've had all sorts of ups and downs, and thank you very much for enabling me to experience all this. Thank you very much. I met you when you were a young journalist. He gave me his press card. He was one of the first journalists to take an interest in all these matters. We created Plein Soleil together, and we met together every morning to discuss matters. At 7:38 in the morning, we met every day. Well, I'd just like to wind up the afternoon by thanking our panel. I enjoyed being in the room. You said many things I haven't heard you say elsewhere. That's very satisfactory. I'd just like to say that there have been ups and downs when it comes to renewable energy, but one shouldn't get discouraged. We're quite resilient. We've already gone through difficult times, and we hope that we'll have a PPE soon. Somebody said to me 18 December. I don't know. We all hope that this will all sort itself out. We have quite a lot of support from public opinion, according to the polls. Many people support renewable energy, and I think we've really won our wager. Economic competitiveness is there. Renewable energy is in an excellent position compared with other energies, and in particular fossil fuels. So we have every reason to believe that they will develop further in the future. We need to create value in our countries. At Tecsol, we try to spread knowledge. We provide a lot of training. We'll be giving training on agrivoltaism soon, and I'd be very pleased if next year, when we're 1 year older, we can meet back here to describe an even more promising setup, because we will have won the first round. There have been some very extreme stances taken by politicians on solar energy, way back in '86, for example. 86, there was a real moratorium. No, 2010. And then there was 2010 as well. 2010 was less major. Purchase prices changed a lot. But in '86, we weren't allowed to make solar energy. I had employed 100 people who made solar panels, and the boss called up and then said the ministry wants us to stop production. '86, that reminds me a bit about today. At them, people said we don't need this stuff. You've heard people speak in this vein this year, where I believe that we will emerge triumphant, and as everyone has understood, we're living in troubled times. It's a very uncertain period. Renewable energy is safe, it's definite. That guarantees prices in the long term, and that's very important. In any event, at Tecsol, we'll continue to forge ahead. And I just hope that you will be as numerous next year to continue the debate. Thank you very much. Thank you, André. Thank you for having attended this conference on renewable energy. And I think the message is a very beautiful one. Just for your information, on the Tecsol stand, we have some interesting things that you'll discover. So come and see us. Cédric Philibert will sign his book, so come in large numbers if you want to have a book signed by the author right away on the Tecsol stand just outside. And thank you to you all, and have a good evening.